Are we prepared to proceed? Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to this online hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the City of Ottawa. The Committee of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial tribunal appointed by City Council to make decisions on certain types of applications under the Planning Act. Excuse me. My name is John Blatherwick, and I'll be chairing this hearing today. With me are my fellow panel members, Bonnie Oak-Charon, Stan Wilder, Heather McLean, and Michael Wildman. Please take note that this video conference is being live streamed on YouTube. The video will be archived along with today's agenda on the city's website. Before we begin, we have a few items to outline for your information. While the issues surrounding development of the city are broad, our mandate is quite limited. The committee cannot consider aspects of the proposal that are not related to the required variances. Noise, pollution, property maintenance, property values, prosecution for illegal construction, personal comments regarding neighbors, agents, or applicants, additional variances without proper public notice. If there is an identified need for an additional variance or variances, including an increase in the extent of the relief required, a recirculation of the application is required. As part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant is required to post a sign on the property and file a statutory declaration confirming the sign posting. And I'm looking at my list of speakers, and we don't have stat decks for any of them. So I will have to administer the oath of solemn declaration to all agents and applicants before we can hear their item. Regarding quorum, if this is lost during the hearing due to technical difficulties, the proceedings will be paused to allow time for the resolution of the issue. Failing the ability to reinstate quorum, hearing of the items remaining will resume at the outset of the next regularly scheduled meeting of the committee. In terms of the hearing process, listed on the agenda and appearing on the screen are the applications we will hear today. For the sake of efficiency, the committee may deal with agenda items in a different order. Note that committee members have reviewed the application materials prior to this hearing and any written submissions received in support or in opposition. In addition, the committee will hear today oral submissions from any interested parties as part of our proceedings. The committee may ask for a brief presentation by the applicant, followed by questions from the members where clarification may be needed. The public submissions portion of the hearing will then begin, and any interested parties will be invited to make their submissions to the committee. Panel members may then ask follow-up questions where additional clarification may be required. When you are called upon to provide your comments, we will ask you to do the following. Start with stating your name and municipal address for the record. We may ask you to spell your name. Then begin your submission by addressing your comments to the panel members. You may ask questions, but please direct them only to the chair. Please limit your comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at the committee's discretion. Once all interested parties have had an opportunity to address the panel, the public submissions portion of the hearing will then be closed. The committee will then make an oral decision to either grant or deny the application. The committee may also choose to reserve its decision. In such case, the panel will deliberate further on the evidence presented immediately following adjournment of the public hearing. In either case, the committee will send within 10 days of its decision, and to all the parties and those who have requested it, a written notice of decision that sets out the reasons for the decision. All decisions of the committee are subject to a 20-day appeal period, during which the decision can be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal for a fee. Before we begin, are there any declarations of interest from any of the members regarding this panel, panel 2, or panel 3's agenda today? Hearing none, no, we don't have any of those. We have no minutes to adopt, so we'll move directly to the list of adjournments. And we had 3, but there will likely be 6 adjournments today. So we'll start with the first adjournment on the list. And that is item number 6, 256 Northwestern Avenue. And this is an adjournment request from the planning department. Is the planner there? Ms. Bakula.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Could you articulate the department's request for the adjournment, please?
Yes. So initially, during the review, it was determined that minor variances are missing for the curved driveways. Yeah. Apparently, the applicant has submitted the revised site plan today and the revised tree information report. and would like to proceed with the regular driveways. In this case, we are opposing the application, but we are ready to proceed with the hearing.
So you've received the revised plans?
Yes, and I asked the applicant to send the revised plans to the committee.
And when were those received, Ms. Picula?
Yesterday evening and today morning, if I'm not mistaken.
Have these plans been circulated to the neighbors of the Champlain Park Community Association? Do they realize, do they understand that these have changed?
Perhaps earlier, because during the pre-consultation, the planning department was commenting, advising the applicant on the regular driveways, not the curved one.
The agent for this application is Mr. Gavran. Is he there?
Yes, hello.
Your address for the record, please, Mr. Gavran.
So I'll be representing 256 Northwestern for now, and we'll jump on Churchill Avenue later on.
All right.
So
You've said the planner from the department says you provided the planning department with revised application yesterday.
So yes, I'm sorry for the little bit of the confusion. Basically, there's a tree on site that we try to save. And last moment, the client asked if we could maybe try to do a curved pathway, to try to get some more space from the tree and whatnot. But we later found out that first of all, the trees are not at the best shape. And second, that those would be an additional minor variances. So in the meantime, we just reverted back to original driveways because we succeeded to get a new arborist report and a letter from even the neighbor that owns these trees that he would be okay by cutting them. So the neighbors actually and the committee actually received the old straight driveway. So they know about that one, and that's how we would like to proceed as well.
So you're reverting to the original plans filed.
Original driveway only, but we did make some minor changes from the last time we had a hearing.
And those minor changes are what?
Minor changes are basically we had some issues with the average grade and the height of the building, and we worked with the city and the neighborhood to get rid of those. And some potential small issues we had with the original design. But again, to not have more minor variances than what's needed for the actual project.
I see that Ms. Pearl is with us today. Ms. Pearl, is the Champlain Park Community Association and the neighbors aware of these changes?
Yes, we are. We were aware that they were working with the planner, the city planner. And so we were comfortable accepting the concept that was quite a late arrival. So we accepted the concept of a curved driveway to preserve the trees. But we also have received the original. We were okay with the original as well, with the straight driveways. So there is no issue anymore with requiring an additional minor variance, and we're quite happy to support the application based on what they have applied for the lot width and the driveways, the front-facing driveways. We support.
And as Ms. Young was with us today from Forestry, regarding these trees on site, Ms. Young, now that things have reverted back to the original application, basically the original application.
Yes, so through you, Mr. Chair, with the new report, the tree condition was described more fully. In the past, they were described as in fair condition and retainable. And so that's when we had asked for the driveways to be moved further away from them to protect them. But the new report includes pictures and more information showing that they're actually in poor condition, and the neighbors have provided permission to remove the trees. So while it's not ideal that all the trees are being removed from the site, in this case, it's considered better to replace them because they are declining.
So it seems like we don't need the adjournment anymore. Any comments from the members of the panel regarding this? Ms. McLean?
Can you just give us the dates of the site plan and the elevations that we're looking at? I'm not clear on whether the elevations we have that were originally filed with the application are what is before us today.
Mr. Gavran?
Well, yes, I hope I understood the question correctly. We had an initial issue with the reference of the average grade and how we presented the garage or the garage level to be. I believe that was one of the questions that was raised the last time, because again, we had to respect the average grade. But what we tried to do was to lower just the garage or just the driveway. So not all around, but just the garage area. But then we found out that it would still count in the building height, which wouldn't be allowed. So that was one of the changes. Another change was just the actual average grade reference from where it was counted. So I believe, again, small items, but just to be precise, we just looked at those items, corrected those items. Now the average grade calculation is correct, and the average grade is shown correctly on the elevations.
So the elevation drawings that were submitted with the application are correct.
Exactly. The only thing that's different from what you have in front of you and today is just the driveway configuration. Elevations, average grade, all the minor variances, everything stays as is, except for the curved driveway is now a straight driveway.
And we have that new revised site plan on file.
Yes, it was sent this morning and last night, I believe, to pretty much everybody.
Okay, thank you.
All right. You satisfied, Ms. McLean? Should we proceed?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Yeah.
Okay. All right. What we'll do then is we'll put this application into the normal order, and we'll deal with it later in the meeting. Thank you very much. Okay. The next application that is up for adjournment is item 8 on the agenda, 501 Cole Avenue. And this is an adjournment request from the Westboro Community Association. And I believe that would be Ms. Mitchell. Is she there?
Hello there. Hi.
Mitchell,
Yes,
your address for the record, please.
485 Richmond Road.
All right. So the Westboro Community Association has filed a request for an adjournment. Please articulate that request.
Thank you very much. And we also have a neighbor here who also would like to bring a few points. There's been very little consultation about this severance with the neighbors. The Westboro Community Association organized a meeting managed to gather almost 10 people on our own to discuss the project, and there was it was not clear as to why the severance is being asked for, whether there's a semi-detached going on, where that semi-detached is going. As you all know from the previous hearing, there is an application on our behalf to have the house with heritage designation. Our understanding of the severance is it's predicated on the demolition of the building, which is not clear at this time. So I'm mystified as to why there would be a continued search to sever the land until after the designation is settled. And so my 2 points: lack of consultation and waiting for the heritage designation. Thank you.
And just for your information, there's a correction to the public notice. And it should have read, the owners want to subdivide their property to 2 separate parcels of land to create separate ownerships for the proposed detached dwellings.
Yes,
Not
so that's it.
semi-detached dwellings.
That's exactly it, Mr. Chair. We just don't know what the plans are, and no one has reached out to the community to tell us what is being planned.
And Ms. Wakula from the Planning Department, regarding this Section 27.9 requirements in the Heritage Act, what is the department's position on proceeding with this application today?
The 60 days notice was submitted by the applicant through Mr. Chair, sorry, and the heritage staff is reviewing currently in order in case they will decide to designate the property. There are 2 conditions that can be imposed on the application, and the applicant won't be able to obtain to finalize the severance because they won't be able to demolish the building.
And that condition would be
2 and 4.
2 and 4. And as far as the department's concerned, we could proceed with this application today because of those 2 conditions.
Yes.
In case Heritage staff determine that this building should not come down.
Yes, exactly.
Mr. Chair, are we permitted to know what the conditions are?
First of all, we're going to deal with whether or not we're going to adjourn this application.
Thank you, sir.
Chown, Mr. Miller, you've heard the request for the adjournment from the Westboro Community Association. Your response, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear us?
Yep.
Technology is marvelous when it works. Mr. Chair, we fully support the advice that you've received from the city staff. There's no reason not to proceed with the application today. Approving our application does not give our clients permission to demolish the existing building. We are in a process with Heritage staff at the City of Ottawa, which will determine whether or not we will be able to demolish the existing house on that property. Your standard conditions attached to severance applications would require demolition of the house before we could finalize the severance. We obviously will not be able to clear that condition if the Heritage staff and Built Heritage Subcommittee and ultimately Council decide to designate this building as a heritage building. There will then be a whole different process we have to go through. But that standard condition protects the house and prevents us from finalizing severance should you approve the applications today and impose that standard condition until we've dealt with the heritage designation and the potential demolition. Staff have seen fit to add an additional condition that speaks specifically to the processing of the request to demolish, just as kind of a belt and suspenders condition, but the committee and the public and the house are all protected by those conditions, and there's no reason why you couldn't proceed with the application for consent this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chown. And ma'am, your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Jacqueline Tetreault. I live at 508 Cole Avenue, which
and
is
just to the adjournment, Ms. Tetreault.
beg your pardon?
And just to the adjournment, not the merits of the application.
Yes, exactly. Well, I would propose that this be adjourned at least until we hear back from the Heritage Committee about the heritage designation. There's been, as has been said by others, and I'm afraid I missed a bit because I was fiddling around trying to get my audio and I lost the audio for a while. However, I would just like to say that you know, the neighbors are very enthusiastic about the possibility of this very beautiful stately home being considered for heritage designation. And so therefore I would like nothing more to be considered by the committee until we hear about the heritage designation. It's very complicated and confusing for many of us on this who live on the street to understand all of the processes, the application for demolition and the severance is for, you know, is for semi-detached. Now it's 2 separate buildings. I guess we would have all liked to have seen some plans for the buildings that are going to be put up. And I don't see that any plans have been forthcoming.
This is a severance application, and quite frankly, there is no requirement to file plans.
Okay, but I guess I'm just saying when we normally get letters from the committee, that there are, I've always seen a plan, so maybe it's not required.
Probably an associated variance with a severance. So anyway,
Okay.
we've thanked you for your input. We've heard from staff that the conditions that they are imposing will protect the property until such time as the heritage planners have looked at it. We've heard from the applicant, the same thing. Mr. Wildman, your comments?
Just to maybe get a bit more clarification on how the condition that the planning staff are proposing would actually happen, Ms. Wakula, or in the case of requiring a demolition permit, how would the people in building code services know that there's a matter that could prevent that from happening? What's the process? And maybe this will give people some comfort that there is a process. So how would building code people know not to give a demolition permit until the heritage designation has been resolved?
Yes, of course, through you, Mr. Chair. There will be, in the system, it will be flagged that there is a 60 days notice demolition of this building under the heritage register, and before this 60-day notice lapse, they won't be able to issue a demolition permit, and usually heritage planning staff notify directly the building code services in this kind of cases.
Okay, and then by service, you mean, or system, you mean that there is a system that building code staff would look up this property and there would be notations to that effect on record?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Property is protected until such time as the heritage planners have done their job.
Yes.
All right. Any other comments from the panel regarding this application? I was inclined actually to consider this, dealing with this application, to be premature. However, given the assurances from staff and the further explanation from staff, I think we can comfortably proceed with this application, knowing that nothing untoward will happen and the heritage planner review will take place within the 60 days. So, all in favor of dealing with this application today? All right, we'll roll this application. Thank you for everybody for your input. We'll roll this application into the regular proceedings agenda. Thank you. Next application for adjournment, the next adjournment request, sorry, is for item number 15. And this is 41E and F Sterling Avenue, and requests for adjournment have come from both the planning department and the Hintonburg Community Association. They're both asking for additional time to review revised plans, which have only recently been submitted. Again, Ms. Wakula, department's position on this, please articulate the department's position.
Thank you,
Or
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Hamilton, sorry. Wrong planner.
That's all right. We did receive revised plans addressing staff comments from the previous hearings. They were only submitted yesterday, so we would like additional time to review the plans and provide an updated report to the committee.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the Community Association would like to see those revised plans as well, and the neighbors. Is anybody from the Hintonburg Community Association online?
Yes, I'm Cheryl Parrott from the Hintonburg Community Association.
Your address for the record, please, Ms. Parrott.
132 Bayview Station Road.
Okay, and to the adjournment request.
Yes, we haven't seen the revised plans. We did have a meeting with the planner, who gave us some indication of what might happen, but we do need time to actually review the plans as well as the neighbors do.
Thank you, Mr. Parrott. Mr. Clark, I believe, is the agent for the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My address is
your address for the record, please, Mr. Clark.
89 Princess Street, Unit 4.
Right. All right.
We agree to the adjournment.
Okay. Will an adjournment to the 1st of June be sufficient?
Yeah, the revised plans have been submitted. I would think that would be enough time for everyone to review if the community association is okay with that.
Ms. Parrott
Yes, we are.
and Mr. Hamilton, June 1st is okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it is.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. McLean, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering whether this has to be recirculated. So I just wanted to ask Mr. Clark, are the variances that are requested being amended?
Through you, Mr. Chair, a couple of the variances have been removed from the request. So originally we were 4 stories, which required a variance. We've removed a story, so now we're below the permitted 10 meters height. So that will eliminate that height variance. There was also an enclosed garage space on the ground level of 41E. That has been removed and made floor area. So now the variance for the reduced floor area for 41E has also been eliminated. All of the other variances will remain the same.
And the floor area for 41F, does that remain then as well?
Yeah, it hasn't changed, so it still will be slightly deficient with the zoning requirement.
And I guess then the question is to the community association representative, how will the neighbors be informed of the new plans and changes?
And one of the neighbors, an adjoining neighbor is on this call as well. I think we could probably quickly circulate to the neighbors to let them know we have developed an email list from the meetings that we've had on this property. So as long as those variances, the new variances are listed, I think we could take that from your website and then do our own circulation as well. But we'd be happy to have it recirculated as well, so that people have more time to look at it if that's appropriate. And there's a couple of neighbors on if you'd like to ask them.
Or perhaps I should have asked Mr. Clark how he is going to circulate the neighbors with regard to these changes.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, my intention was to send the plans to Ms. Parrott and to Ms. Hode to disseminate. I can also send the cover letter that was sent to the city, which outlined the changes to the variances. We have done a presentation to the community association that outlined all the changes, and the plans reflect those changes from that presentation. So I'll send the material, and if they require more information, then we'll do what we can to send it to them.
Thank you.
Mr. Hamilton, in your estimation, are these material changes to the application that require a recirculation or not?
I do not believe so. It's my understanding that the plans submitted are actually an improvement from the previous plans, and that's an improvement with respect to the variances being requested. So the only change would be the removal of the variances that were noted by Mr. Clark.
Okay, so we can pass on going through the recirculation process in the department's position. Okay. All right. You're happy with those responses, Ms. McLean?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would just say it's incumbent upon the applicant to make sure that the neighbors are made aware of these changes before the next hearing.
Yeah, and I think we have Mr. Clark indicating that he will do so, and with Ms. Parrott's help, we'll make sure that everyone who needs to know does know. All right. Would the 1st of June be adequate?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. If you're asking me, yes, that would be fine.
Okay. And Ms. Parrott has said yes, and I think Mr. Hamilton's okay. So all in favor of adjourning this application until the 1st of June? All right. The application's adjourned until the next hearing.
Thank you.
Okay. No problem. Committee was reviewing materials that are pre-meet. We determined that there may be a necessity to adjourn item 7, which is 284 Churchill Avenue North. And again, Mr. Gavran is the is the agent for the applicant. Is he there?
Hello, hello. Just one moment. Yes, I'm here.
All right. Now, this application is a minor variance to produce or to permit reduced lot widths, reduced lot areas, and a front-facing garage for a new semi-detached dwelling. The planning department, and I'll read directly from their from their comment. Front-facing garage would require removal of the healthy city tree. It is possible to construct the same amount of units without impacting the city tree. Redesign is necessary. So, Mr. Hamilton, should we be adjourning this application and waiting for revised plans? Given the
Thank
fact
you.
that the city, there's a healthy city tree that would have to be removed.
Yes, Mr. Chair, staff are of the opinion that the removal of the tree would be unacceptable. So our current position on the regrading of the front yard is that we would be opposed to it. If there is any opportunity for revision, that would be certainly preferred. Otherwise, our position would still remain to be opposed to this application as it stands.
So if that tree stays, then there's going to have to be a change in or a redesign of the site plan.
Yes.
And is there a possibility they're going to have to be a redesign of the house, for that matter, of the proposal?
It will be fairly significant.
Mr. Gravan, you've heard from staff that they are not going to support removing the city tree in front of the proposed.
Yes, if I may add to that, any kind of design change, even if this wasn't a minor variance to allow 2 semi-detached buildings, any kind of deviation from the original build will hurt that tree. So even if we design this to have some different driveways and whatnot, at the end during the construction, the roots of the tree would still be impacted. There is no way that we could save that tree unless we just don't do this project. Now, as I understand, the tree is a healthy tree, but we are also proposing 4 trees for one that's planted, meaning an additional tree, 3 trees. So I do understand the city's position. I try to look at it from the architectural perspective in terms of the site plan, but also in terms of the living conditions that I would have to provide to the clients or to the design to allow for those driveways to be on the outside and not as proposed. So again, even if I succeeded to redesign it in a way that the roots would still be impacted.
Thank you. Mr. Wildman, your comment?
The comment from Ms. Young, please, on the comments that were just made by the agent.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. We have seen lots of developments similar to this that have taken into account tree protection. This is a small tree. It's, I think, just under 30 centimeters. So the protection area would be much smaller for this tree than a large mature tree in a similar situation. So I think it is very much possible to retain this tree and build the same number of units. They would have to look at the setbacks of the building, which I think would be similar to the existing house, and certainly the driveway locations. But I think it is possible. And we have had situations like this in the past where trees have been protected.
Thank you, Ms. Young. So this is not the first time something like this has had to be done, and it's been able to be managed and still accomplish the number of units. So the risk for the applicant is that if there's no desire to have an adjournment to revisit the plans, that this committee will vote, and that vote may well not be in the applicant's favor. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Wilder?
I gather that the problem here is that the front-facing garage, one unit, is it necessary to have that? I mean, the problem here is the house can be built, but the problem here is the garage. Is that right, Mr. Gavran?
You have that as a concept, but we also, what we're trying to do with this property is at the beginning, we noticed that the slope to the entry of the property is very steep that in winter, it's actually a hazard. So what we try to do is to make a flat entrance driveway and to put retaining walls on the side. Now, by doing that, we remove the slope, but Ms. Young's comment about preserving the tree wouldn't hold anymore because of the height difference. So as I do understand that maybe if we respect the slope, the original slope of the property, yes, we could preserve the tree. But if we go ahead with our concept, almost having no slope, I mean, we have to have some to respect the street, of course, but almost no slope, making it a way better entrance. Then because of the height difference, we couldn't respect the tree anyways. The roots would be exposed. There's a high difference of at least 6 feet at that point. So I do understand we are trying something different. Now, I don't know if the concept is acceptable, but we got the neighbors on each side of the property to agree on the concept. We consulted with them. So again.
Well, you've talked to the neighbors, but you haven't convinced the city. And quite frankly, I don't think you've convinced this panel, Mr. Gavran. And I think really the way to go right here and right now is to adjourn this application until everything has been resolved. And the question is, how long do you need to do this? Is 2 weeks sufficient time
So
to have further discussions with the city planner and with the forester, and then come back to us? I'm asking you if 2 weeks is sufficient time to finish your discussions with the city.
To know exactly on what point do we need to discuss, because if the concept of no slope or our
well, that's why I'm asking you how much time do you need? Is 2 weeks sufficient to get this resolved?
Let's say it is. We'll do our best to do that.
Mr. Hamilton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, from our perspective as well, we agree.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest that we adjourn this application until the 1st of June, and then we'll proceed with it at the next hearing. All in favor of adjournment until June 1st?
Just one question.
To the adjournment, Mr. Wilder.
Sorry.
Can't hear you.
Sorry. Can you hear me now? To the adjournment, Mr. Gavran, you see no reason for accomplishing anything. I would say forget the parking. Parking is not a requirement on the street, on the zoning. Forget the parking space. Just consider that as part of your discussions over the next 2 weeks. Okay. Project can go ahead. You can have a semi, no parking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilder. All right. All in favor of adjourning this application until June 1st, the next hearing of the committee. Application's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
So. He does not. Application that we discussed as potential adjournment is items 11 and 12, 576 Brunel Street. committee looked at this application, and we note the Transportation Environmental Services have said that, and I'm quoting them, the proposed driveway connections to Codds Road are not supported, as they would be within the Codds Road Blackthorn Avenue intersection and would therefore not conform to the intent of section 26 of the private approach bylaw. Such accesses would also likely involve removal of trees and may impact the adjacent bus stop on the east side of Codds Road. Mr. Hamilton, should we adjourn this application until this is resolved?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff and the applicant have consulted with the city's right-of-way group this week. There are exceptions to that provision that was listed there. So there is opportunity to still have the driveways permitted as it stands. They may, and we don't know this yet because we have not had the plans reviewed, but they may require slight alterations to the driveway location, just moving them side to side.
All right. Mr. Wellman?
So we have the Transportation Engineering Services Group saying they are not supported. It sounds like pretty strong language. And then we have another comment about the potential for removal of trees. Ms. Young, are you aware of this matter, and what are your thoughts on that if you are?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I wasn't aware of the transportation comments, but I am aware of the tree issues, and I've met with the applicant on site, and the trees in that area are in poor condition, and really with grading changes and everything that would be needed there would be no way of retaining trees in that location. So trees will be planted.
Okay, so in this case, the comments from, that's why I asked you, the comments from the transportation people are saying could involve the removal of trees. It sounds like you have an alternative solution to that should that happen. I guess the question, thank you, Ms. Young. The question for this committee is when a engineering unit says are not supported, whether there's ability to amend a condition or not. I think maybe somewhat irrelevant if the department is saying they're not supported. So as a minimum, I'm going to suggest, Mr. Chair, that this matter must be stood down until we hear back from the engineering unit.
Thank you, Mr. Wildman. Mr. Hamilton?
Through you, Mr. Chair, sorry, would that be a request for adjournment to consult with the commenting department?
Yep, I believe so.
We can certainly do that within 2 weeks.
All right. Is the applicant's agent?
Yeah, I'm Eric LaBerge, for the record, business address of 2008 Gatineau View Crescent. I was hoping to proceed with the hearing just based on the conversation with Mr. Craig Hamilton on finding potential solutions, understanding that we would bear the risk of going to the building permit stage, having a deficiency, and ultimately having to come back for another committee request for a different proposal. But if the committee rather get kind of confirmation from the Transportation Engineering Group about potentially moving around the driveway slightly, then I will respect the committee's decision.
All right. Thank you, sir. Mr. Hamilton, would 2 weeks be sufficient to resolve any issues with this application?
Certainly, Mr. Chair.
All right. Then I'd suggest to the members of the panel that we adjourn this application until the 1st of June. All in favor? All right, this application is adjourned until our next hearing on June the 1st. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Mr.
12. Okay. That. Final potential adjournment as concerns item 5 on the 4 and 5 on the agenda, 107 Prince Albert Street. This is a consent and minor variance application to subdivide the property into 3 parcels for a 3-unit townhouse row with reduced lot areas and rear yards, reduced lot width, and a non-complying driveway. And I believe we have received the site plans. There's been a revised site plan produced that now brings the balconies into conformity. However, this committee does not have revised plans on file. Is the agent there?
Yes, hi, Eric Cursipu for the Numbered Company.
Okay.
The elevations are being revised because it's on a CAD program. In order to remove the sliding patio door and replace it with a window, there's a lot involved in that structurally before doing the drawing itself. The site plan clearly indicates that there will be no second floor balcony. We provided the undertaking and informed the planner that we will not be providing a second floor balcony. We should have the elevations ready tomorrow.
Well, fortunately, we're having the hearing today. And
no, I appreciate that, but I mean, are the elevations actually required?
If we tie our approval to plans file, you bet.
Okay.
So can you have those materials to us so that we can put this on the agenda for the 1st of June?
If you could give me 15 minutes, I will contact the architect and have them sent to you right away.
That's, quite frankly, the 1st of June is what I suggested.
I mean, within 15 minutes, we can have that to you, simply showing, the two elevations indicating that there is no rear balcony.
You've also got neighbors who are involved in this application. How are you going to get these to them in 15 minutes? I think, quite frankly, I think the best route for us to take is to adjourn this application until the 1st of June, so that everybody has had an opportunity to review the revisions, including the neighbors on the street.
I understand the request. I mean, I just have a problem with that date. But as I said, the revision for the elevation will simply show that there is no balcony, which the site plan also indicates that there is no balcony at the rear of the property.
Yeah, which is something the neighbors need to see, and that we need to have on file if we're going to make a decision. So I think, and all members of the panel in agreement that we should adjourn this until we have all materials in our hands, and that would be the 1st of June. Anybody object?
Yeah.
Ms. McLean?
I'm just wondering, were there not balconies on the 2nd and 3rd floors on the original elevation drawings?
No, there's just the balcony on the 2nd floor. There's a ground floor deck to provide access from the ground floor. There's a 2nd floor balcony on the elevations, and the site plan. The site plan is revised to reflect that, and the architects are working on the rear elevation to reflect that there is no balcony.
Well, I don't know. That's anything further, Ms. McLean?
No, I was just trying to check my notes. I thought one of the neighbors had talked about some privacy, but that related to the cedar trees, I guess. So I think it's difficult walking on elevations at the very last minute. I'm not sure that I would support it. And if the applicant, if June 1st isn't convenient for the applicant, it can be further on into June for the hearing, I think.
So there's 2 hearings in June. The first one is the 1st of June.
Let's postpone it till the 1st of June then, please.
All right. All in favor of adjourning this until the 1st of June, so we have all the materials we need to make a decision? All right. All right. Thank you very much. We'll see you next hearing. Okay. Give me a second here, folks.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. We did receive a late request for an adjournment for items number 3, 50 Gilmore Street from the agent, Ms. Dahu.
Ms. Dahu, for item number 3. Hang on. Is Mr. Wu there?
Good afternoon. Hi.
Mr. Wu, late request for adjournment.
Very late, and I do apologize for that. And I just wanted to speak to a comment that was received from Hydro. Unfortunately, we of course only received the comments on the Monday before the hearing, so it doesn't allow for a lot of time to address any potential issues. But just in an abundance of caution, we would appreciate an adjournment until the June 1st hearing, just to ensure that there's no conflicts with the Hydro line that was indicated in the Hydro Ottawa comment received.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. Garnett, do we still have space on the 1st of June?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I believe we would.
Okay. All right, so an adjournment till the 1st of June. And Mr. Wu, when you're making your presentation next month, to make it clearer for me, and I think other members of the panel, where are the front yards, side yards, and rear yards on this property? It fronts on McDonald, yet it has a Gilmore Street address. And I think that needs to be clarified with the committee so that we understand the changes that have been made to their application.
Sure, absolutely. I will make sure to include that in the presentation.
Maybe you can find out how that house became an actual Gilmore Street address, given it fronts on McDonald.
It does front on McDonald, and there are very established cedar trees that are along the McDonald frontage. And so I think the natural entrance to the property has been from Gilmore for many years. So, but yes, I will be sure to speak to that in the presentation on the 1st.
Okay, I think Ms. McLean had a comment. Question, Ms. McLean.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I didn't lower my hand, but just to clarify, if you could add directionals to the yards. So what interior yard are we talking? Is it the southerly? Where's the rear yard on the property? So just some further clarification. Thank you.
Absolutely. Through you, Mr. Chair, I can actually send an updated site plan that just more clearly highlights that before the next hearing as well, so you have it in advance.
That would help. Okay,
Great.
all in favor of adjourning this application until the 1st of June? Application's adjourned. We'll see you next month.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Running out of applications to hear. Okay. So we will now move to the regular agenda. And the first item we'll deal with is item number 1 on the agenda, 430 Mansfield Avenue. And this is a consent application to convey a portion of the property to the abutting property known municipally as 432 Mansfield Avenue. And the agent for the applicant is Ms. Holmes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee.
For the record, your address, please, Ms. Holmes.
It's 566 Crossfield Avenue.
Okay, and we'll have to administer the oath. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do, Mr. Chair.
Okay, please proceed, Ms. Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to advise you of, I guess, of 2 things. The first one is that I'm absolutely prepared to make a presentation to you. I've submitted the materials to the committee, but I've also submitted a request to the committee with respect to the conditions that have been forwarded by staff. Specifically, the property owner has a concern with condition number 2, which is a condition related to a corner site triangle at the corner of Skeed Street and Mansfield Avenue as part of this application. So I'm just wondering if I could get a bit of direction with respect to the committee's preference, whether I just deal with the condition or at the application as a whole.
You can deal with both, but Mr. Hamilton, there's apparently some concern regarding that corner site triangle. Is there a reason why that's there?
Yes, Mr. Chair, the applicant and I have spoken a few times prior to the hearing today. Their preference is that the condition be removed. Staff are retaining or remaining their preference that we keep the condition in. for the corner site triangle. We did submit notice for the removal of condition number 1.
And that's independent services.
Yes.
So we're left with the rest of the conditions: corner site triangle, an agreement regarding an active railway line, noise and vibration attenuation study, a joint use and maintenance agreement, because the shared driveway is on a severance line, and the lot line adjustment condition.
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Well, Ms. Holmes, if you'd like to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I did submit actually to the committee this morning a rationale supporting the removal of the condition. With respect to the application itself, what we're looking for is a lot line adjustment. It really is a fairly small adjustment. We're looking to transfer approximately 43 square meters of land from 430 Mansfield Avenue to 432 Mansfield Avenue. And if I could just ask, thank you so much. So the next slide, please. So the subject properties are outlined here in red. There are 2 existing lots of record created by way of a plan of subdivision. As you can see there, it's a small residential enclave that's actually located north of Richmond Road. The property is bounded by Skeet Street to the north, Mansfield Avenue to the east, and within the larger block, it's actually located just south of the Ottawa River Parkway. Next slide, please. So this is the house that's existing on the property. This is 432 Mansfield Avenue North. The house itself is not being touched as part of this application. The lot line, as currently configured, runs actually right adjacent to the driveway. And so even though the driveway actually serves the residential property, it's located on the vacant abutting lot. Next slide, please. This is a view to 430 Mansfield Avenue. This is the vacant lot from which the lands are being taken and proposed to be transferred over to 432. I think this is actually a good slide to pause on just here for a second with respect to that condition related to the corner site triangle. Because from this point of view, you can't actually see the vacant lot. Mr. Chair, what you're looking at here is the hedge and a portion of the property that actually belongs to the city. So the vacant lands are located within the boundary of the hedge, and the corner that you see here where the edge of pavement starts for both Mansfield and Skeet Street is actually located on city property. So I want to pause because what the city would be looking for in terms of a corner site triangle from the property owner would be beyond this view here and actually inside of the hedge, which is why we've flagged the condition as a concern.
Okay.
Next slide, please. This shows the existing lot configuration. So again, you have the 2 lots subject to the application outlined in red. Skeet Street is just to the north and Mansfield Avenue is just to the east. I've identified the configuration of the lot in green. So as you can see, there's an existing pool and retaining wall at the back of the property, for which a part was created way back when, and that part actually belongs to 432. The lot line then jogs adjacent to the driveway, and there's an existing easement in place for purposes of access for 432 because it's the only lot that actually uses the driveway. Next slide, please. So this is the application with respect to the draft reference plan. So the area in green would be the lands that would be transferred from part 1, which is 430 Mansfield Avenue, to 432, which is a lot 349. Very lots of numbers here. And it would then standardize and regularize the existing lots. So we'd have a fairly standard configuration. It's a minor alteration to regularize the configuration of those existing lots. The application is in full conformity with the City of Ottawa official plan, the current and the council approved draft, as well as the Westboro secondary plan, as no developments being proposed as a result of this application. The lots will continue to meet the minimum requirements of both lot width and lot area with respect to the zoning, which is R1 zone subzone 0. It meets the conditions for approval under the Planning Act with 2 existing lots on the plan of subdivision, both with frontage onto public roads, both serviceable lands, and the application represents good planning as an in public interest. Next slide, please. And Mr. Chair, this is the final slide with respect specific to the corner site triangle condition. And I might go between this slide and the previous slide. And there are 2 things I want to draw your attention to. The first being is that Skeed Street, which is a dead-end street. It dead ends on 3 sides. So to the Ottawa River Parkway to the north, it terminates at Westminster to the west, and Fraser to the east, is 26 meters wide. So that is actually wider than Richmond Road, which is an arterial roadway located just south of the property. Additionally, there's an unopened laneway. You can see there's kind of the red line of the Skeed Street lot, which is 430. Beyond that is almost looks like a rectangular piece that runs all the way across the 2 blocks that the street runs. And beyond that is actually the edge of pavement. So the city would be encumbering, and with all due respect, the city is absolutely entitled to take right-of-ways and corner site triangles for the purposes of city infrastructure and promoting traffic and movement, safe movement. But in this instance, the corner would actually be within city property that's 26 meters beyond what the city currently owns. And there's an existing hedge. There are no stop signs at the corners of Skeed and any of those intersecting streets, including Fraser, Mansfield, and Westminster, because the traffic is actually so minimal on those streets. So it seems to, it's hard to reason why you would encumber a small application of this type with a corner site triangle with a road that already has such a large road allowance, which was created in 1911 by way of plan of subdivision, and by all accounts, Mr. Chair, has not been touched since. So with the greatest of respect for staff, we disagree with the request for this condition, and we would respectfully request that if the committee were inclined to grant this application, that it wouldn't grant it on the condition of the corner site triangle.
So the distance between the corner, the northeast corner of the property that I'm looking at here, and the northern boundary of the Skeed Street right-of-way is 26.1 meters?
That's right, Mr. Chair. And that's obviously an approximation taken from the geomaps, but it's fairly accurate.
That's over a 4-lane cross-section. That's in excess of a 4-lane cross-section.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
That's wider than Bank Street.
And I guess just to add one point is that if the city was concerned, I know in the condition it talks about, for the purposes of visibility and traffic movement, if the city did have a concern about it, I think what would be important is to know that there's the existing hedge, which the city is in city right of way, and that could be removed to improve that condition.
Okay. Please proceed.
That's the extent of my presentation, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Mr. Hamilton, would the city be willing to grant an encroachment permit to the property owner and not take that corner site triangle? This has been done in the past.
It has. It's not an option that we've explored in the circulation period for this application, so I won't have an answer for you immediately, unfortunately.
Okay, because I think, quite frankly, the applicant's agents made a pretty strong case for not keeping that corner site triangle as part of the conditions. Ms. McLean, you had a question or comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just questions for both Mr. Hamilton and Ms. Holmes. Mr. Hamilton, there's no development being proposed here, so why would we impose a condition for a corner site triangle?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the requirement does come from the official plan. It is also within the zoning bylaw. It does give us the permission to take them at severance despite no development occurring. It does get applied to the severance application. If there were a minor variance, it wouldn't technically be applied to the minor variance. It's just the consent that is requiring it. This is one of our only opportunities to take the corner site triangle. I don't believe that we're able to take them at the building permit process.
And are we satisfied that this is technically a corner lot?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, the small strip of land that runs perpendicular to Skeed Street, it is just it's a separate parcel for some reason. That has also been opened as a public right-of-way, so it does constitute part of Skeed. The reason we have so many parallel parcels is because there's actually significant city infrastructure running alongside the road. There are trunk water mains and sewers in that parcel as well.
So this lane that's designated on the plan is an open public right of way, an
Yes,
open road allowance.
that is my understanding.
Okay, and the other question I had was about the driveway that may still extend over onto three, what numbers am I at? Onto lot 430, or is there a zoning violation there? Can you have a driveway on another parcel, or?
Currently, we are allowed to have individual single width driveways. So I don't suspect there's a zoning issue. The only issue that staff had was that we would be having a shared element between two parcels, and we've covered that with the JUMA condition.
Okay, and so thank you for that. And then Ms. Holmes, I looked at the abstract on file. Your letter had indicated that it was under one ownership. Can you just explain that to me? The two parcels were under one ownership. Is that right, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's my understanding. So it was sold as two existing lots of record, but it's one owner that owns both.
So how do you convey a strip of land from yourself to yourself then? If the applicant owns the entire two parcels, or the entire parcel, I'm just a bit, and the abstract on file, it was only for 432. It wasn't for 430. And then your letter said it was under a single ownership. I was a bit confused. So you're satisfied that this is doable, I guess, in the end?
There's nothing, through you, Mr. Chair, there's nothing to indicate otherwise. These are two existing lots of record that are created by plan of subdivision. My understanding would be that there should be no concerns in that regard.
Okay, thank you. And I guess my final question is, does the northerly lot line of part 3 line up with the northerly lot line of part 4? Or will they align? Will it be one contiguous?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Wildman, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, a couple of things, Mr. Chair. Thank you. So I'm glad that the applicant did acknowledge that the Planning Act does allow for the taking of the triangle. The triangles aren't only for site, they are for utilities, they are for future infrastructure that may go in that place as well, whether it's at grade or below grade, snow storage as well. The road out front is not a 20-meter road allowance. Is that correct, Mr. Hamilton? Slightly smaller?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I do believe it is slightly less.
Okay. Now, when we take triangles like this, we usually have a reason or a widening. And I say that from the context of, yes, the authority is there, but often you have a reason. You expect to widen a road, you expect to put a sidewalk in, you may have some infrastructure that's required in the future. What is driving the requirement for the triangle beyond the fact that it can simply be done under the Planning Act?
Through you, Mr. Chair, sorry, that was directed to myself, correct?
That is, yes.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair, it comes down to, so yes, we have a significantly wide right-of-way on Skeet Street. The Mansfield one is not as wide. There are two intersecting streets, so we're largely looking at the Mansfield width. The second aspect that was of concern for city engineering staff is the angle that Skeet and Mansfield actually meet. It's about at a 60-degree angle, which would be more of a concern than a regular 90-degree intersection.
Yeah, and I can buy that to a certain degree, Mr. Hamilton. Is that what's driving the decision here, though? Is I guess what I'm trying to say is, yes, you're allowed to take it, but why are you taking it? Is that what's driving it? It's not a proper 90-degree angle?
I don't think I would be able to say that is the sole reason. It's the sort of the accumulation of the multiple reasons mentioned.
So one other reason is that the Mansfield road allowance is slightly less than 20 meters.
Correct.
And then we have the angle of the intersection, and what would the other be for future? Like, normally you know why you're doing it, and so I can buy into the angle to a degree, but is there any other reason that's known? Like, why? I guess I'm saying why. Convince me.
So to the effect of planned infrastructure works, there are none that I'm aware of. So I don't think we have reasoning beyond that.
Okay, so more or less you're hanging your hat on two things. The slightly smaller right of way of Mansfield, and that it's not a traditional 90-degree intersection, more or less.
Correct.
Okay. I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wildman. Mr. Wilder.
Oops, thank you. Yeah, the suggestion that Mr. Blatherwick had, you're saying you couldn't give us an opinion today from the planning branch whether or not they would be, you'd be agreeable to an easement. Ms. Holmes, would an easement satisfy you if as a compromise here, as opposed to removing that condition of the triangle?
It's actually an encroachment, Mr. Wilder.
Pardon?
An encroachment.
I mean an easement. I'm sorry. My mistake. I meant an encroachment. Sorry. My mistake. Sorry. I meant the encroachment. Sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not quite sure what the encroachment would achieve instead of the corner site triangle. It still encumbers the site, and based on the existing conditions of the road, and I just wanted to point out that the staff report condition does talk about the need for a proper sighting distance for motorists when performing turning movements. But again, the corner site triangle would be within the city's own hedge. So I'm not getting back to the question, my apologies, but I'm not sure what the encroachment would do in place of the corner site triangle.
Okay.
All right.
Anything further, Mr. Wilder?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. So we have this request, and we're down to 5 conditions as highlighted by or articulated by the city. The corner site triangle, which you just discussed in detail, an agreement because of the active railway line, noise and vibration attenuation study, the joint use and maintenance agreement, and a lot line adjustment. The department deleted the independent services condition, and the applicant objects to the corner site triangle. I'd like to reserve on this application and have further discussions with a member of the panel after we conclude this hearing. So I think we will reserve on this application, and you will receive our notice of decision in 10 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next application on the agenda is item 2, 171 Stanley Avenue. There's a minor variance to permit a reduced interior side yard setback and to permit an addition in the side yard. It is proposed to construct a 2-story addition on the existing detached dwelling. The owners want to demolish a portion of the rear addition and construct a 2-story addition on the east side of their existing 2-story detached dwelling. There are no concerns from the planning department. The Conservation Authority is fine. Hydro Ottawa talks about any modifications not affecting accessibility, which is pretty standard stuff. The Heritage Planning staff have reviewed the application and are in support. And the agent for the applicant is Mr. Simmons. Mr. Simmons, are you there?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
For the record, your address, please.
340 Catherine Street, Ottawa.
Okay, and very briefly, Mr. Simmons.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Oh, wait a second. I've got to do the, I knew I was going to forget this today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Yes, I so affirm, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right. Please proceed, Mr. Simmons.
Mr. Chair, we're asking for a variance. The sort of heritage aspects of the zoning bylaw suggest that additions to heritage structures be behind existing buildings and narrower than them by 0.6 meters. In this case, there was a significant addition to the building, probably in the 80s, which was so significant, which was wider than the original heritage structure. You can see, oh, thanks very much for this illustration. You can see that this addition extends, about 6 feet wider. We've had extensive consultation with the local community representatives and with the Heritage Department. And you can also see that there's a further projection by a couple of feet into the side yard in the form of a balcony. And we agreed, or the Community Association and the Heritage Department have said, well, if we don't go any wider than that balcony projection and don't restrict the view out to the Stanley Park behind, that they think it's appropriate to meet that line of setback, and we've adjusted our application to conform with that. The next shot, please. The original massing in blue has been reduced in height. We have, however, extended forward into the side yard. So we're within about, I don't know if this looks entirely accurate, but we're about 3.5 meters back from the front of the original house. And we have modeled our front, our massing to ensure that we're not encroaching too much on the original roof lines and so on. So I'm sorry I'm not explaining the variances too much, but we're not behind the original structure. We're definitely coming in towards the street, but everyone seems to be happy with the resulting massing and approach to the design. I'm happy to answer questions if there's more.
For the two variances and how they meet the 4 tests, Mr. Simmons?
Yes. We believe that the addition is minor in nature, given all the adjustments we're making to the original massing and so on. We believe that it's desirable to maintain the use and modernization of this house, and so that the existing heritage structure can continue to contribute to the overall neighborhood heritage context. And lastly, the intent of the zoning bylaw on the official plan is being maintained because it's just keeping the original use of a single family house, both of which are proposed under the zoning bylaw on the official plan.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. We note that there are no conditions. Again, there's no objection from any of the agencies, and certainly none from the neighbors. Any questions or comments from members of the panel? Prepared to vote on this application? All in favor of the application as presented to us? Your application is approved, Mr. Simmons. Good luck with the project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the.
Thank you. Next application we'll deal with today is item number 6, which was on the adjournment list and is no longer. This is an application, a minor variance application, permit reduced lot widths and front facing garages for a new semi-detached dwelling at 256 Northwestern Avenue. And Mr. Gavran is the agent. Is he there?
Yes, hello, everyone.
All right, we'll have to administer the oath of solemn declaration. Mr. Gavran, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Yes, I do.
All right, please proceed, Mr. Gavran, with your application.
So hello, everyone. I believe we touched on this project at the beginning of this meeting. I don't know if you remember from the previous meetings, but basically what we are proposing is a semi-detached building, a unit that's going to replace an old house. The house is really in really bad state, so it needs to kind of be gone just to clear the site. But what we are proposing is a modern build, standard on that street, in that neighborhood, semi-detached dwelling offering around 1,000 square feet per floor. We are staying in the range of our setbacks. The only issue being the site width. So that would be one of our minor variances for each side, lot width. And because of our project and the way that we designed it, last time we had an issue with the street cap analysis, and we do recognize that the pattern didn't allow for the front facing garages, but we would still like to propose that as a design since our neighbor next to us has a similar design, and our, let's say, site location compared to the neighborhood, I believe we're at the corner of the entrance, or basically at the entrance or at the exit of the neighborhood, which exactly at that image. I don't think that a garage or no garage would add to the design. I believe just a beautiful project would add to the design or the aspect of the neighborhood. The fact that there's garages, as you can see in this picture, I don't think that's a minor element. Now to the aspect of the lot width, as you can see, just an example next to us, a semi-detached building, we would be again doing the same idea. Our concept is a little bit different in a way that we're kind of presenting almost a three-story look-alike, but we are not. We're still saying beneath the zoning or beneath the max height of the building. We just played with the height of the levels to try to achieve something a little bit more interesting for the neighborhood and for the client himself. He wanted this very modern design that's going to last not just next 5 years, but in the next 15, 20 years, that's going to stand out, let's see, from the competition. So this is something we're proposing. Again, staying within the laws, regulations. We worked extensively with the city, with the neighborhood, to try to achieve the best design. And as we spoken earlier this morning, we did try to protect the trees. Unfortunately, you saw in one of the pictures, the trees are dead. And I believe they're a hazard because they were tangling in the electrical wires. So that was an additional item I wanted to bring. Don't know what more I could add to this project that you didn't hear. I believe we talked about, when it comes to the 4 tests, that about the variances being minor. I believe we addressed that issue. Of course, the project being desirable for the neighborhood, while just the entrance or the exit to the project kind of shows that anything of a newer construction of a good design, I believe, will be desirable for the neighborhood. And when we're talking about the zoning bylaws, official plan, again, we worked extensively with the city to cover every single item that we had to or could in terms of this project and the design. That would be end of my presentation. Again, if you have any questions, I'm open.
Ms. Wakila, the city's position regarding this project, now that you've had discussions with the applicant and the agent?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Planning staff acknowledges that smaller lots are present on the street and seem to be characteristic to the neighborhood. However, We are concerned, we are opposing the minor variance for the streetscape character analysis. When considering the impact of the requested variances, we are concerned about the potential cumulative impact of a design that is not compatible with the existing context in terms of its impact on the streetscape on a smaller lot than what is permitted as of right. And it's our position that where an applicant seeks to develop an undersized lot, such proposal should be at minimum designed in a way that is compatible with the streetscape. Thank you.
So the department is objecting to the front-facing garages?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Gavin, do you have any contextual evidence that shows us Northwestern, that side of Northwestern right now? Give us some idea of how many buildings on that street have front-facing garages and how many do
Yes,
not?
since we last measured it, I believe it was 21 didn't, 9 did. So now if we add these two, we would be 21 that don't and 11 that do. I believe that was the streetscape analysis that was submitted to the city. Don't see it in front of me. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, it would be 21 that don't. So I believe even by allowing this, the other lots would have the same, let's say, kind of restrictions. It's not that allowing this, we would kind of create a point that there are no return or that the other properties now have to be allowed the garages. I think we're still a little bit far away from there. And because of the site location, I believe that it wouldn't make a huge difference again in terms of neighborhood aspect and being desirable or not.
Thank you, Mr. Gavin. Ms. Pearl, on behalf of the Champlain Park Community Association.
Hi, Heather Pearl, 251 Keyworth Avenue, co-chair of the Champlain Park Community Association and coordinator of the Planning and Zoning Committee for Champlain Park. Essentially, we're supporting this application. Basically, we have been very pleased with the consultation that we've had with these this group right now, and we find that there are many positive aspects to the proposal. They've made the significant changes that were required after having adjourned it in the past. It's compatible with most new and older development in Champlain Park. And front-facing garages are basically the norm. And we've had extensive redevelopment in the past 15 years, and every single one of them is going in this direction. So we have a small anomaly in this particular case because it's across the street from a institutional, an area about 300 meters, I think it is, of institutional zoning, which makes it very difficult for, to determine exactly how many lots should be considered in a streetscape analysis. And it's a part of the only part of the street that has really, really considerably older buildings that were built probably around 1945, 1950. So the rest of the neighborhood has changed substantially, and this is one small area that has not. In another, if you put this house or putting this house, maybe 5 or 6 properties down the street, there would be no need for a variance for the front-facing garages. I think that Lynn is going to deal with this in somewhat more detail. I'd like to carry on talking about landscaping and trees and regreening in the neighborhood, where they've provided an attractive landscape design, and they are going to be putting in more trees. We have in this submission provided the information regarding distinctive trees and trees on property lines that they need to assess. One thing we are concerned about is that the Northwestern Avenue median be protected during construction, because this is not a staging area for construction materials and equipment or a parking lot for construction workers. And unfortunately, in the case of this median, which may be unique in the north end of Ottawa in a residential area, we are watching continued destruction by contractors of the city property. They do not protect the trees, they smash them, they break them. One issue, of course, is that services for the property, for the properties on both sides run partially under the median. And so care needs to be taken when trenching to connect with the services, and care needs to be taken when the construction is done. Essentially, we're concerned that when new homes are constructed, it's crucial to retain mature trees and or plant new ones. They're going to be planting new ones, 1 new tree in each rear yard, 2 trees in the front. This is ideal. We want them to protect the neighboring properties. And we know from a public safety perspective, if you sort of use the proper occupational health and safety measures for shoring, et cetera, and for demolition, you will actually protect public safety. So I'm going to finish basically. We have a lot of change in this neighborhood. We've had change from the get-go. We have properties that have been and are being redeveloped similar to this. And I think that the streetscape analysis, while lovely everywhere else, there has to be some give when you have unique situations like this. And to me, it seems like this is exactly what a minor variance is for, is to assess the site context in relation to the community and provide the approval for a variance in this particular case. And believe me, there are other cases where I would be fighting tooth and nail against it. So, but this one, yes. So that's me.
And I take it that the applicant is going to provide you with a designated substance report when the building comes down.
Will you do that, Zoran?
Yes, no issues, of course.
Okay.
Who knows what's in that old house as far as insulation is concerned.
Exactly.
All right. Ms. Bankier.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. I don't want to repeat any of the points made by Heather. I live at 183 Carlton Avenue, which is the street one over from Northwestern, and about half a block in. I would be, my backyard would be abutting that side of Northwestern's backyard. So I'm very close. I've lived in the community for 25 years, and I've been involved with the zoning and planning and development issues really since 2009. So the point that I mostly will speak about is my support for the front-facing garage in this location. On Carlton, where I live, most of the properties have already either been developed or in process of being built, or applications are in process. And every new semi-detached home has a front-facing garage. What we are looking for is retention of the building envelope, front, rear, side yards, height, privacy, and in terms of, shielding the balconies and that sort of thing. Front-facing garages have not been an issue, and partly it's historical. The original infill bylaws, when they came into effect, did allow front-facing garages on that size of subdivided lot. Subsequently, that was removed, but you might say the the barn door was already open, so to speak. Most of the development results in streetscape analyses on Carlton as allowing front-facing garages. Northwestern has less development, but every single proposal for a semi-detached has also had a front-facing garage. We've had similar development in the R2 on Cowley Avenue, on the cross street Sunnymead, and the cross street Clearview. So we're just not used to running into this as an issue, and we haven't made it an issue. In fact, it's what the community regards as, the new streetscape for a new development in our community. In fact, we are not in favor of rear yard parking because we have a mature urban forest in the rear yards that we're trying very hard to retain. And we know there's an option of no parking. It's only been done on half of a semi, and not naming names, it has resulted in front yard parking on that particular semi. And the no parking option, in fact, raised the ire of some of the neighbors who were afraid that people would be parking on the street or on their front lawn. So for our community and on that size of lot, as long as they retain the amount of soft landscaping that is required and plant new trees, retain other trees, we're okay with the front-facing garage, and I wouldn't object to it based on the streetscape analysis in this particular location. That's what
Thank you,
I
Ms.
have.
Banker.
Yeah.
Any questions, comments from the members on this application? We have another application before us, ladies and gentlemen, where the department is opposed to front-facing garages as a result of streetscape character analysis, and we have heard from the community association that it's not an issue. Ms. McLean, comment?
Just a comment that because we don't have any consent applications with this minor variance application, it makes it difficult to understand how the new owner is going to construct 7 new trees. So he gets his building permit, he builds his building, and then we're left with whatever land's left over. And it's my understanding, and maybe we could hear from Ms. Young, then he's got to put in the 7 new trees. Is that correct?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, in order to obtain a tree removal permit, which will be required for the 3 trees proposed for removal, they will have to provide a tree planting plan, and that is what the city will use to hold them to planting after. There won't be securities or anything like that, but we will have the plan and we will do our best to enforce that.
And so the trees may be shared trees, but the new 7 trees would be on this property itself.
That's the plan right now. There's 1 tree that hasn't been accounted for yet. So, I mean, that could be planted on the other property, but that remains to be seen.
And if we had the consent applications along with this minor variance application, undoubtedly we would be putting on conditions, I gather, that, yeah.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the members of the panel? I think given the city's position on this, I think we'll reserve on this application and further discuss it at the end of the hearing. Thank you very much, everybody, Mr. Gavin in particular, and the Champlain Park Community Association reps. Very good input, and you'll hear from us by way of a notification in 10 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next application on the agenda is item number 8, which was on the adjournment list at the beginning of the hearing. 501 Cole Avenue. And this is an application to subdivide the property into 2 parcels of land for a new semi-detached dwelling. And Mr. Miller and Mr. Chown are the agents for the applicant. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Miller will make a presentation and I will be available to answer any questions.
All right. I note that there are a number of conditions, cash in lieu of parkland, the condition regarding the 60-day period for the heritage review of the demolition application. Number 3, owners agreeing the location of proposed structures, driveways, retaining walls, projections, etc., located on grading and site plan will be determined by the planning department based on the least impact to protected trees, an existing dwelling removed and existing services capped, grading and drainage plan, independent services. And I'm wondering if there should be another, and perhaps Ms. Young can answer this, another condition added regarding a tree protection condition, or is that not necessary in this instance?
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Before we move forward, can we take the oath, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Before we begin, gentlemen, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do.
Okay. All right, Ms. Young, tree protection condition, is that necessary or not?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's difficult with these severance files that don't have plans. Right now, no approval is given for tree removal, despite what the TIR recommends, but we have no plans to base anything on. So the wording of the condition I've provided about developing a grading plan and ensuring any structures don't impact trees, that's kind of I think the best I can do for that. I did submit a late condition today about capping the services outside of the critical root zone of protected trees. I'm hoping that you received that. So that is one thing. If the building is demolished, we need to make sure that the trees are protected until such time we have plans and know what's happening on the site.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Young. All right, Mr. Chown, Mr. Miller, please proceed.
Just before Mr. Miller starts, Chair, we were going through the conditions. Because we are not proposing semi-detached dwellings, I'm hoping that staff will concur with their request that we delete condition 7, which would have required the joint use and maintenance agreement. I only raised that because you were going through the conditions, sir.
Okay.
So with that, Mr. Miller will make a brief presentation.
All right, thank you.
If the coordinator could put up thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. The applications in front of you this afternoon are severances for the property municipally known as 501 Cole Avenue. The requested severances will facilitate the construction of 2 detached dwellings. Next slide, please. Can we get to the next slide, please? Thank you. The subject site is located within the Kitchissippi ward of the City of Ottawa on the east side of Cole Avenue. The subject property is shown within Westboro in relation to Westboro Beach, Highland Park, and Carlington. Next slide, please. The subject site is in an area bounded by Kenwood Avenue to the north, Princeton Avenue to the south, Golden Avenue to the west, and Roosevelt Avenue to the east. The subject site is an interior lot with 20 meters of frontage along Cole Avenue and an area of 701 square meters. The majority of lots on this block of Cole Avenue are subdivided. The subject site is one of the larger lots on Cole Avenue. The requested severances will create lots that are consistent with 8 subdivided lots on the east side of Cole Avenue and 10 subdivided lots on the west side of Cole Avenue. You go to the next slide. The image in front of you shows the draft reference plan. The applications seek to split the existing lot into two. We get to the next slide. The image in front of you shows severance application 1. The application will create the southern lot labeled as part 1 on the image in front of you. Part 1 will have a total area of 351 square meters, a depth of 34.9 meters, and a frontage of 10 meters on Cole Avenue. Part 1 fully conforms to the zoning bylaw. Bring it to the next slide. The image in front of you shows severance application 2. This application will create the northern lot labeled as part 2 on the image in front of you. Part 2 will have a total area of 351 square meters, a depth of 34.9 meters, and a frontage of 10 meters on Cole Avenue. Part 2 fully conforms to the zoning bylaw. We will now speak quickly to the rationale for the severances. With respect to 53(1) of the Planning Act, a plan of subdivision is not required for the proper and orderly development of the municipality. With respect to 51(24) of the Planning Act, the proposed development has regard for the following matters of provincial interest. This is test A here. The supply, efficient use, and conservation of energy and water, the adequate provision and efficient use of communication, transportation, sewage, and water services and wastewater management systems, the minimization of waste, the orderly development of safe and healthy communities, the appropriate location of growth and development, and the promotion of development that is designed to be sustainable, to support public transit, and to be oriented to pedestrians. B, the subject property has access to hard and soft services, so the severance of the lot is not premature. We can go to the next slide. The subject site is designated general urban area in the enforced City of Ottawa official plan. The enforced City of Ottawa official plan encourages and supports infill and intensification in the urban area. The requested severances result in the intensification of an existing lot within the general urban area. The requested severances result in 2 fully conforming lots that will accommodate 2 ground-oriented units where one exists today. The subject site is designated neighborhood on the council-adopted City of Ottawa official plan. The subject site is located within the inner urban transect in the council-adopted City of Ottawa official plan. The official plan encourages and supports intensification and infill development in neighborhoods located within the inner urban transect. The requested severances would facilitate intensification within an approximately 15-minute walk of 9 bus stops, as well as the proposed Kitcha City Light Rail Transit Station. The station will provide light rail transit services as part of the LRT Stage 2 expansion. D, the requested severances will facilitate the development of 2 detached dwellings, which are a permitted use in the R3R exception 2687 zone. The requested severances will result in 2 lots that fully comply with the R3R 2687 zone for requirements for lot width and lot area for detached dwellings. The proposed lot widths and lot areas are compatible with existing land use patterns and the lot fabric of the neighborhood. I, the existing detached dwelling is connected to existing utilities and municipal services. As such, adequate municipal services are available to service the site. J, there are several schools that are located in proximity to the subject site, including Nepean High School, Churchill Alternative, Broadview Public School, Westboro Montessori School, Notre Dame High School, all of which are within 1.1 kilometers. We can go to the next slide, please. The requested severances will support a permitted form of housing that complements the pattern, scale, and the desirable characteristics of the neighborhood. The proposed lots have regard for matters of provincial interest, are not premature, are in the public interest, conform to the in-force and council-adopted official plan, are suitable for the land, will have adequate utilities and municipal services, are located close to schools, and utilize services efficiently. The proposed development represents good land use planning. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Ms. Young, I forgot to ask one question of you. Did the applicant provide you with the tree information report as is required as a mandatory submission for a consent application?
Yes, a tree report was submitted. It was based on the allowable building area. So there's really, again, no detail for the arborist to provide accurate information on. So we have a tree report, which is essentially just a tree inventory for the site. But we can't make any decisions based on it without plans.
So there's no map provided that actually shows the locations of the tree on the site.
There is a map with the tree locations. It's just there's no plan for the building. So we have no idea what's proposed there other than just the severance. So right now, technically, there's no impact to trees, but it all depends on what is planned.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any questions, comments from the members of the panel on this severance? Ms. Oakeshott.
Thank you. I just wanted to go over again the condition with regard to the heritage issue, just to make sure I understand the process if Ms. Wakula is there. So the notice is submitted, and I just wanted more information about the 60 days. Is that the 60 days for the heritage process to come to completion? My question, I suppose, is what if they don't? If there's something that's deferred or whatever, maybe you can just give us more details on that.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So the 60 days notice was submitted just recently, 1 week ago. I don't have the date, unfortunately, right now in front of me. Since then, the Heritage is reviewing this property, and they will be deciding to designate it or not based on the historical features and by their own merits. Usually it takes 60 days, and within this 60 days period, the demolition permit cannot be issued at all. And if the property is designated, the demolition permit cannot be issued at all as well. And it means that the applicant cannot clear two conditions to finalize the severance.
And what if that process takes longer than 60 days at the Heritage Group?
I cannot say that, but usually they're designated within this time frame.
Okay, I guess I was just looking to confirm that it wouldn't be able to lapse completely and then they would be able to go ahead with the severance.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Any further questions? Mr. Miller and Mr. Chown, you had a comment, question?
Just further to the response provided to you by staff, I can assure the committee that Heritage staff have indicated to us that they're on track to bring a report to Build Heritage Subcommittee on June the 20th, and if necessary, getting to a decision from council before the end of the 60 days.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chown. Ms. Mitchell, you have comments, questions?
Yes.
Please.
Yes, thank you for hearing me. I just wanted to return to the matter of, I understand very well the difference between the land and the house, and those are two separate things. And I understand the committee today is looking at the land. However, I'm hearing a lot of the words depends and maybes and ifs, again, coming from the folks looking at the tree protection. Tree is also really important to us as well as part of the heritage designation. So again, they don't really have sufficient information to really form a proper opinion. The lack of consultation on this with neighbors. I wish my neighbors could have heard today what was said at this committee meeting. We've had nothing. As I say, We first heard it was going to be a semi-detached. Now it's two separate. Thank you for clarifying that. And we appreciate the committee for bringing that up the last time and getting that clarified. But it just speaks to the lack of consultation in general about this project. And for that reason, we would prefer the severance not be granted. My understanding was more information was asked for at the last meeting by Mr. Wilder. I don't know whether he's happy and has received what he needs. I'm not quite sure what the end result of that was. But really, sir, that's the end of my comments. Lack of consultation. We do still feel it's premature. No firm sense of what's going to happen with the trees. I know that there are properties on Cole that have been severed. Each case is different. And I just don't feel we have sufficient information to understand fully what this severance is and what it will mean. Thank you.
Okay. Unfortunately, Ms. Mitchell, there's no legislative requirement for public consultation to take place when applications like this are filed. It is up to the applicant. We certainly encourage applicants to consult with the community association and the neighbors, but they don't have to.
I understand that, sir, but thanks for saying that you would encourage it. And then this
We do. We certainly do. I mean, it makes life a lot simpler for everybody in the final analysis. Someone who sat on both sides of the table, I know of which I speak. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for your input. Any further comments, questions from the members of the panel?
Mr. Chair, would I be able to just make a couple of concluding comments?
Mr. Chown, please proceed.
Thank you. So just two quick things. With respect to consultation, I think the panel knows that we have a track record of consulting with community associations when we have applications that include minor variances, and we have building plans to actually talk about. In this case, we do not. The building plans are in evolution. They're part of the discussion with heritage staff in terms of what the houses could look like at the end of the day. The only other comment I want to make with respect to protection of trees is that, and I think Ms. Young will confirm this to the committee, is that if this project goes ahead, we still have to go through a building permit process, and at the building permit stage, at that point, staff will have the opportunity to assess the trees to be protected and possibly removed. So the city has another kick at it in terms of dealing with the trees on site. I just wanted to make sure the committee was aware of that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chown. Ms. Wakula, the applicant's agent has raised the issue of the continued need for a joint use and maintenance agreement when two singles are going to be built on site. Should that condition be eliminated?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, because the condition was imposed according to the notice provided, which stated semi-detached, and because the proposed development is for detached, the JUMA can be removed.
Okay.
Thank you.
You satisfied, Mr. Chown?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Wilder, you had a question or comment?
I have a question for Mr. Chown. Mr. Chown, you indicated that some tentative preliminary plans, drawings, concepts, design have been provided to the heritage staff. So I gather your client at this point does not wish to share whatever initial drawings, architectural design that's being contemplated, perhaps options to the community association at this time?
Well, they're being reviewed by heritage staff. I think that we would want to have their comments to know whether or not they were comfortable with those designs. If they're expecting significant changes, then those changes will get made over time. At this point in time, we can't present anything to the community association with any confidence that that's what our client will be moving forward with.
I see. So you're not prepared to show any, I mean, obviously it's preliminary, as oftentimes, you've come forward with, and I realize there's no variances here. I understand that. But considering the concerns evolve in this situation around the heritage preservation and perhaps what concept your client is proposing in terms of the two singles that'll be built here. I was just curious to see whether or not, I guess you figure it's probably premature then in your mind to discuss anything with the association that you might be discussing with Heritage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilder. Any further comments or questions from members of the panel? Are we prepared to make a determination on this, or do we wish to reserve and discuss this after the end of the official hearing? Mr. Wilder?
Yeah, I'd like to reserve on this, please.
All right. All right. Well, thank you all for your input. We will reserve our decision on this application, and the notice of decision will be in your hands in 10 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next application right here is item 9 on the agenda, 1089 and 1091 Gladstone Avenue. And these are minor variances to permit a second floor balcony to be enclosed for additional interior living space as part of a mutual project with the adjoining neighbor, both 1089, excuse me, and 1091 Gladstone Avenues. And the agent for the applicant is Mr. Bedard. Is he there?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Your address for the record, please, Mr. Bedard.
My address is 1091 Gladstone.
Okay, thank you. And before we begin, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Through consultation with my phone, the video doorbell, I can confirm that is true and that it is still the case now.
All right. All right. So very, very briefly, Mr. Bedard.
Okay, very briefly. I don't have a formal presentation as such. However, from my submitted materials in my cover letter, I do have a few images that I think might be helpful just to describe and further elicit the proposed work. I'm considering, by example, page 4 of my cover letter, if that's possible to be displayed. If not, I'm willing to just verbalize it as well. Our current property is zoned residential fourth density subzone UB, and we're requesting a minor variance to, in particular, section 1.44 in brackets 1 in brackets D, which confers a stipulation that our front yard setback align with the average front yard setbacks of adjacent properties, and in no case may be less than 1.5 meters. At present, we have a front balcony projection that is supported by 6x6 posts that are affixed to a concrete slab, which has been in place for a number of decades. And our proposal for this application is requesting that we enclose the upper story of the balcony so that we can increase interior dwelling space, roughly adding about 30 square feet. This shows the site plan. So by example, the proposed addition in the middle and bottom there. Okay, so this is certainly a picture of that's been generated to showcase what the exterior facade would look like. At present, so this is effectively the same front balcony that we have, and we're merely looking to have it enclosed to increase the front dwelling, or to increase the interior dwelling space. As has been articulated in the planning report by Mr. Craig Hamilton dated May 16th, we also contend this proposal to be minor in scope. we also consider it to be desirable and appropriate development for the use of property, given that these homes, 1089 and 1091 Gladstone, are quite small. 1091 Gladstone being a semi-detached duplex with a basement apartment, the interior volume isn't extensive. So the closure of the front balcony would allow an additional amount of interior dwelling space so as to support an office, as would be the case for 1091 Gladstone, with regards to our growing families. So we also find that this is in keeping with the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. We're not requesting any change to the use of the dwellings, merely a small addition to the front facade, as is in keeping with very much the kind of streetscape in our surrounding neighborhood. We are currently, I consider, a bit of a minority in the minority of properties that don't actually have a front balcony enclosure in Hintonburg, and certainly in the surrounding blocks. So I've provided in my cover letter a few pictures to showcase what some of those other locales look like. I don't really have too much to add, I think, beyond that, but I do welcome any questions you might have.
Well, the variance, am I correct that this reflects an existing condition?
Pardon me?
That the variance reflects an existing condition? You're already 0.42 meter setback?
No, so we're currently 1089 Gladstone is at 2.84 meters, and 1091 Gladstone is 2.81 meters.
All right.
So this proposed work would reduce the front yard setback by approximately 2.4 meters, meaning that the new front yard setback would be about 0.42 meters.
All right.
In both cases.
All right. You're aware of the condition, and the department is asking that a joint use and maintenance agreement be agreed to?
I do, yep.
Okay. Mr. Hamilton is there, I believe. Mr. Hamilton, what's the reason for a JUMA?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In this case, the existing element at the front of the home is a balcony, so it is a permitted projection. They are changing it to a part of the principal dwelling, so we're forming a new shared party wall.
Basically an extension of a party wall that already exists.
Correct.
So this will, okay, all right. Some of the members are wondering why this is necessary, myself included. Okay, that explains that. Any questions or comments from the members of the panel regarding this application? Be prepared to vote. All in favor of the application? Your application is approved. Good luck with your project.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Okay. Final application we'll deal with on the agenda today is items 13 and 14, 292, 292A, 292B, Fifth Avenue. There's a consent and minor variance applications to sever the property into two parcels for semi-detached dwellings with variances for lot widths and areas, entrances, front-facing garages, projections, and walkways. The planning department are opposed this application. They've also suggested 9 conditions. And there is a possibility of a 10th. The agent for this application, Keslerova, are you there? Ms. Smith, are you the agent?
Yes, and Zuzana Keslerova works for me as well.
Okay. All right, so we'll administer the oath to either one of you. You solemnly swear. Hi.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. We'll let the owner, Mr. Pavel Kinkra, to make that statement, please.
All right. You solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies, for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do.
Okay. All right. This application includes a large number of variances, and there has been, quite frankly, fairly negative response from neighbors to it. So that being said, who's making the presentation, Ms. Smith?
I'll be doing it, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right. For the record, your address?
292 5th is the address.
Okay. All right. All right. Please proceed.
All right. So I had a presentation that I'd submitted. In the second slide, just to touch on some context. It's a home that we bought just before COVID, mainly because of the location and the area, which I really liked. Circumstances during COVID changed for me, and fortune smiled upon me, and I'm now getting married and hopefully starting a family. So it kind of brought about this project. We started looking at different options, and once we had settled on what we thought was the best one, we consulted with everybody that was meant to be consulted with. We went door to door in the neighborhood, met with the neighbors. This was back in January. We have submitted a good bit of support as well from the neighbors, written support. We admittedly didn't solicit it because, to be honest, some of the backlash caught us a little off guard late. We did consult with the councillor's office, who were in support of this type of project and the gentle intensification, which was a term I learned from them. And we did also consult with the Glebe Association, with Miss Carolyn, who was also very helpful. She definitely saw some of the different concepts we looked at, and we had a fruitful conversation there, although admittedly she too said she wasn't 100% sure which direction she would go with it, although also used the term gentle intensification and support overall of projects like this. On the next slide, just to touch on some of the actual variances themselves, you'll see the red, the darker ones is our proposed units. The others are homes in the neighborhood that have been approved with a similar or identical, or in some cases smaller, lot size, severance, and width. So those are fairly precedented and common in the direct vicinity of our home. Also to note that in all the other directions of the home, we do comply and meet all the requirements. So that's 28 separate homes with similar dimensions in that direct vicinity in the same block when it comes to the width and the area, which we believe is quite minor in terms of the variance. The remaining variances, they all pertain to one thing, and it is the the garage. One leads to the next, and it's all around those. The next slide basically shows, the next two slides, we've taken the liberty of showing house by house the streetscape, because it's a word that's come up obviously often in this. So there's not too much that could be said of like completely common. It's a very diverse streetscape. There's lots of different types of homes. There are by way of parking, just in these next two slides, there's 24 houses with 9 having garages, 5 of which are front facing. So it's not necessarily dominant, but it is, close to half of these have garages. Of the homes that were built in the past 50 years, the garage is quite dominant. So it was brought up earlier in one of the hearings that there's the historical ones, but then there's also the newer homes, and those are all obviously trying to answer this question of parking without beating around the bush too much. Almost every one of these homes, 22 in fact, have a driveway You can see the cars parking towards the front of the homes there also. We did take the liberty of actually checking with the city on getting a parking permit, and we were denied. So there's no parking solutions on the street. So obviously every home here is dealing with it somehow on their property, and which is what kind of led us to that. We understand that the garage is not meant to be the prominent thing, which is we've designed it with a bit of a slope, and it is inset a little bit from the front facade, just not from the front entrance, because the front entrance itself is also set into the home. That's mainly to allow for the steps to come forward enough so that they can fit comfortably and not be too obtrusive, which leads to the minor variance on the pathways. So that's basically, those variances. They're all minor, but they're all linked to the one request, which is around the parking garage. On the next slide, there's just highlighting a couple of the essentially identical types of builds and designs. I guess still touching on the streetscape. And then we took the liberty on the next slide of showing some of the houses, if you go out by another block, of another set of homes that are very, very similar as well in lot width, size, and I go back to that word of gentle intensification. So with that said, final slide, the next one just shows our proposal. One is the floor plan, which everybody's seen, I'm certain, and then the next one is the street view. Going through the 4 tests, we believe that despite the fact that there's a number of them, I don't think any of them are individually, they are massive, they would fit the definition of being minor, even collectively. Certainly desirable for the property. It gives an opportunity for more families to move in, allows our family to move in, and it addresses the parking issues, which are substantial on the street and were brought up even by the association and a lot of people that we spoke with, as well as on the streetscape. They're visible. The general intent of the zoning bylaw is definitely maintained in this case. The purpose of this particular zoning is, and I quote from the purpose, it's allowing for increased housing choices and promoting efficient land use and compact form while showcasing newer design approaches. We feel this design certainly helps and it fits, more than fits that. And number 4, the minor variances are in line with the overall plan. We know there's a call for increased supply of housing throughout the city, and intensification and infill is a substantial part of the overall city plan, with a specific target of central areas and main streets, such as this one. So with that, I thank you for listening to me and welcome any questions.
Yeah, I understand the department has some concerns with this application. Ms. McEwen.
For you, Mr. Chair, Planning Department is opposed to approval of minor variances. It seems the number of variances, except the one for the undersized lot, are to permit the design oriented around the front-facing attached garage, which is not permitted according to streetscape character analysis, and the design of the garage itself is not in compliance with newly enacted provisions of the bylaw requiring 0.6 setback. And when planning department's position where there is a development on the undersized lot, it should be compatible with the built form and streetscape. Thank you.
Okay. We also have several other members of the neighborhood who wish to speak. Mr. Corba, is he there?
Hello, my name is Larry Corba. I live at 50 Chrysler Street, but we also own 301 Fifth Avenue, which is within the circle, 60-meter circle of the development. I've been a resident in this area for about 40 years, and I organized a number of neighbors who are opposed to this development as well. The main problem with this development, if we could have the slides. So while the coordinator puts up the slides, the main problem of the development are the front-facing garages, totally out of character with the existing context of the street. And while there may have been approvals for some driveways in the past, and certainly on the north side of the street, where the lots are larger for the two infill semi-detached dwellings, there is significant space to actually park a car in front of the garage. Not a desirable situation, but it's possible. As well as that, as you can see, I try to summarize all the different variances on the left side and show that they all sort of intermix, leading to this total mismatch with streetscape, and also having the main entry on the second level of the dwellings. And an effective garage, this was pointed out as well. I just was doing measurements on the drawings that were provided. But moreover, there are also driveway safety concerns with both the walkway and stairway going up to the entrance and the driveway length and so on. Anyway, that being said, it's just incompatible. And we'd like to just go on with the next slide, please. The next slide is about the 11.2 meter height. I talked to Ms. Smith about this in our conversation on May 11th. The fact is that this is 3.1 by 2.34 meter rooms on the fourth floor to accommodate access to the front deck on the roof of the dwelling. Aside from it being too tall, moreover, there's a problem with, in general, construction. Putting decks on the roof means complication when roof is replaced, and I hope that Mr. Concura understands that this is a liability more than a benefit. Next slide, please. Now, we have examples, of course, and Mr. Concura showed pictures of atypical situation. This is what we have with 305, 307 Fifth Avenue. In my submission, I also showed 267, 269 Fifth Avenue, where similarly, there can be as many as 4 cars parked in front of the garage. In these cases, there's actually, in the case of 305, 307, there's 9.3 meters between the sidewalk and the garage. And you can see the second car is parked into the sidewalk, totally unacceptable. It's also parked on the walkway to the house. The developer actually moved the walkway and the driveway close together, which would be unacceptable now. And of course, we argued against this development because of the streetscape problem, but back then it wasn't part of the bylaw. Next slide. So in an attempt to remedy the situation, the owners of these dwellings decided to take away the front garden in order to pour concrete for more parking. They did this without a permit. And this is the sort of thing that neighbors shouldn't have to deal with this. So there were about 5 different neighbors who contacted the city about this problem. And the owners, of course, were upset. They were upset with me because I told them that I was calling the city because we own the property on the right, the triplex, because they were digging right into the lot line. Next slide. So essentially what I'm saying is that when you're designing a property, you need to deal with parking, but you should do it in a way that really makes sense for the neighborhood, not lead to a liability in the future. So I show this example, I mentioned it in my report of a triplex. It's not an ideal design in terms of streetscape, but it certainly doesn't have a front-facing garage. The width of the lot is the same. And in fact, when I spoke to Mr. Kankura on May 11th, he said that they had considered a triplex and it would have required no minor variances. That's what he told me at the time. And yet we're left with all of these minor variances, which are significant overall. So that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Any questions from the members to the presenter? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this application from the neighborhood? Okay. All right. Any questions, comments from the panel regarding this application? Mr. Wilder.
Thank you. Sorry. Okay, the question I have, sorry, G and N, to permit the front walkway to extend to the city right of way at a lot of 5.23 meters, where basically where a driveway is provided, it should be a lot, cannot be in a lot less than 10 meters wide. You know, I looked at this, Mr. Kankura, I looked at your plans, and I have to agree, this is somewhat overdevelopment. This is a small lot, and you're packing in parking. You have to go into the right of way. You know, I can appreciate the situation with parking on the street, but nonetheless, there are ways to redesign this property, like I think it's one you own or family own, maybe next door. I don't know exactly, but there are ways to deal with this in such a way that you don't need all these variances. I just feel it's really overdevelopment, and it just doesn't fit with the street. So, you know, clearly, you know, the front yard parking is a real issue, which is requiring you to go into that right of way. Is that correct?
Yeah, just exactly. In order to have parking there, those variances are needed. Otherwise, unless there's suggestions, I haven't heard suggestions other than total redesigns. Susan, you seem to have an idea.
Can I just jump in here?
Please, Ms. Smith, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair. This is not front yard parking, it's about the garage parking. And I think, and that's the question. If there was any interest in keeping this garage situation, it may be possible to remove the 3 final variances by making the building a bit smaller, pushing back the entrance. But it's not, there's really only 4 solutions to parking that I'm finding with downtown. It's street parking, which is not permitted. There's no permits permitted, Pablo found out. There's the side yard driveway, which is problematic in itself. Like, they're narrow, it's difficult turning at the back, and it removes the rear amenity space for people. And then this is the 4th one is the garage. So none of the solutions are perfect, but this is what we're dealing with downtown. And I think this is an appropriate development for the property, given the lifestyle of that area. But it's a small footprint, and we can reduce it even further if it was considered acceptable to have that garage facing the street, which is on other properties, as we saw in the neighborhood. And there are people, and the other option, the fourth option I didn't mention is just straight front yard parking, which there is legal and illegal. And that's another item where, it's a solution, just straight front yard parking, which I don't think the planning department wants to encourage that either.
Mr. Wilder?
Yes, I can, sorry. I see what I understand. It's the garages, but I see this as a trade-off. You mentioned it yourself here. It's a smaller fit of a house on the property, a smaller house. In terms of, I'm not sure what size units these are going to be. It's and this is inner city. I appreciate that, and you're dealing with a very small lot here. So perhaps a smaller structure, smaller sized house, and then you can have the garages. Or it's a trade-off here in my mind. Perhaps a redesign for a smaller structure would work, as you suggest, as an alternative.
Well, the question is, would a garage still be acceptable as a solution if we met the bylaw for the garage being set back from the front porch and the steps being pushed back a bit, which would reduce the size of the basement and the ground floor of the property. We'd still have, we could still have the upper portion hiding the garage as an overhang.
That's a complete redesign of the building, correct, Ms. Smith?
It's a major redesign, yes.
Ms. Wakula, I already know the answer, but if the design was changed and the garage was pushed back, would the department be any more amenable to two front-facing garages on Fifth Avenue?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So in this, with the redesign, the application will be evaluated on its own merits again. But looking at the streetscape character analysis provided, that's the confirmed lots without the garages 17 and with garages only 4. And given that the parking is not required for this type of use in Area X, so department will be opposing it again because in this kind of case, we would be looking at the parking that's not conflicting with the zoning bylaw.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Wakula. Mr. Corba, briefly.
Yes. So I want to point out, because the developer is using examples and the architect examples on the north side of the street, that's a newer part of the street. Setback to the sidewalk is much greater, as I already mentioned in my presentation, only about 5.1 meters to the garage door compared to 9.3 or 9 meters for the two cases of the two semi-detached dwellings. So that makes a totally different situation.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Corba. So, Mr. Kankura, you've heard Ms. Smith. Are you prepared at all to redesign the homes with garages positioned further back from the street to reduce the visual impact?
I'd be willing to look at that if we can remove one or two of the variances. The parking's important to us, but if making the house smaller and trying to accommodate there.
So if you change the design, we could eliminate variances E, F, and G, I believe.
We could try, yeah.
Well, I guess it's in your court. We can either proceed and make a decision, or we can halt these proceedings. And if you're want to pull the application, and then I guess you'd have to reapply with a different design.
Is there a possibility for adjournment and to adjust these, or no?
I suppose we could. Ms. McLean, you've got more experience than the rest of us on these kinds of applications, but an adjournment and a redesign work in this occasion or this situation?
Yes, we could always adjourn it sine die, Mr. Chair. It's just challenging that we can't be dealing with a fishing expedition where the applicant files an application, has the hearing on it, and then, at the end of the hearing, if he doesn't like the way things are going, he may want to reconsider. But having said that, yes, we could adjourn it sine die, and the applicant can resubmit, consult with the neighbors in the planning department and go by that. I'm just a little reluctant when we've heard the applications and the neighbors have taken the time to come to the hearing, and that we don't, make a decision, but in any event, I'll leave it there.
Mr. Kankura?
Just on that, I certainly didn't mean this as a fishing. I just, my key question is the garage, the permission for the garage. So, if the issue is the volume of variances and reducing them, we're still going to be requesting the garage. So that's why I suggest an adjournment. That it seems like we might be able to shave off 2 variances and come back, still dealing with the crux of the problem, but at least eliminating those few pieces. So
you're still going to have the planning department opposed.
Yeah.
So maybe it's in the final analysis, maybe it's best that we just take the application that you presented us with, reserve on the application and make a determination, and then we'll go from there.
Yep, sorry, I through you, Chair. I just was opening up for discussion. I didn't mean, we're not here going on a fishing expedition so much, I guess, just getting some feedback and having some discussion.
Okay. All right. Any other comments from the panel? But Mr. Corbett, we're done on this application.
Yes. So I would suggest to the developer and architect to look at 60AB Ella Street, where it's only surface parking. The main entrance is on the main level, which at least addresses some of the streetscape issues. It's not great having a car parked in front of the building, but you would have to at least stagger the front building to accommodate a car parked in front of it. You have to be well over half a meter away from the sidewalk to park a car. Once again, that would mean only 1 car parked per semi-detached dwelling. And as I mentioned in my report, 3 of the 4 semi-detached dwellings on the north side of that block, they have 2 cars each. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Corbett. Okay, so with that being said, no more comments, questions from members of the panel. I think what we'll do is we'll reserve on this application, and you'll receive our notice of decision in 10 days. Thank you very much for your input.
Thank you.
And I believe that concludes our agenda for the 18th of May. We are now officially concluded with this application. Thank you very much for your input. The committee will now move to the